Gonna go on and start this recording too. I almost forgot. All right. So let us get this show on the road. Um, so expect to get the CEUs by Friday. Please, you all, if you don't get them by Friday, don't hesitate to email me. Like, just do it. Just email me because that means something went wrong. We usually get things out pretty good, but every now and then we kind of everything's not 100%. So as soon as you notice, if you notice like I hadn't got my stuff, go on and hit us up and let us know, and we will make sure that that gets out to you. So by Friday, hopefully we're hoping that hopefully by tomorrow or Thursday, but Friday latest just in case. All right, so we've got a presentation for you tonight, and we're going to dig on into what is up. Um, and so the topic that we will be having is life after the rainbow. I love that title. Helping clients through pet and grief loss. All right. And so let me all right. And so I'm going to read really quickly a bio for our speaker that we are having tonight, Christina Lilly, LICSW. All right. Um, and let's go on and get to the bio here. Miss Lilly's social work career began in 2006 as a caseworker and then supervisor for the Department of Human Resources, also known as DHR. Following her tenure with DHR, that's nice. She transitioned into substance abuse and clinical mental health. Mrs. Lilly is the founding partner with Mind Warrior Wellness in Danville, Alabama, located
Delville.
just Daleville. Thank you.
Delville. That's
Daleville,
okay.
Alabama. I was just about to brag on how well I've learned to read because I used to be a really bad reader, but we'll say that
Okay.
for another training. Daleville, Alabama, located just outside of Fort Novosel. Okay, I probably didn't say that right. Formerly Fort Rucker. As a 20-year military spouse, she is honored to work so closely with our military community. Ms. Lilly practice Ms. Lilly practice utilize well, she uses therapy dogs in practice and helps clients feel more comfortable and at times regulate their emotions. As the founder of Sweet Home Doberman Rescue and an animal lover and advocate, she uses skills and training as a social worker to provide support and education on pet loss and grief to clients, rescue volunteers, community partners, and the general public. Without further ado, we're going to hand the virtual mic over to Christina. Thank you, Christina, for
Thank
being
you.
here. And thank you for being an awesome part of Social Workers of Alabama and just really engaging the group. We really appreciate that. All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this. Um, so yes, as Troy mentioned, this is going to be on pet loss and grief. I did not do I didn't do I don't have slides or any of that kind of thing with me because I just feel like their PowerPoints are hard to make entertaining, like if we're just being completely honest. So I feel like just some conversation where people will feel like, are able to ask questions and that sort of thing. So first, my question is, and feel free, like if y'all want to pop in with your cameras here and there, that would be fine, fabulous. So that I'm not just talking to myself or to feel like I'm talking to myself. But first, how many are here? Like, how many is this an actual topic of interest for? Because, sometimes we go to things because like we need CEUs, which is, I'm not judging, but, if if this is actually something that's of interest. Okay. All right. Now we're getting some hands up. Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. So I know that we've got, a bunch of people here and I'm super excited. It looks like there's like 41 so far. And so this is super exciting. And I know that this is a shorter a shorter evening for discussion for this, and that's totally understandable. I do want to do my full hopefully I'll be planning to do a full training for this in the next, month or two. But regardless, I'm glad that all of you are here. So there are several types of bonds that we talk about when we talk about attachment to our pets. So first of all, who's an animal lover? I mean, you have, whether it's dogs. I'm a dog person, so I'm going to refer to things as dogs a lot just because that's what I know. There's no hate against the cats or anything else. I mean, it's just, that's where we are. We have dogs, we have 2 bearded dragons, we have 6 ducks and 2 Highland cows. So, I mean, we've just got like this conglomeration of things going on. But dogs are definitely where it's at for us. And for both of my husband and I, it's been, since childhood. And we, our pets are our rescues. I'm not against breeding. I'm gonna go ahead and put that out there. Like there's this whole big thing in the, community, rescue versus breeding and blah, blah, blah. Everything has its place. So, but we all know, for those of us that have the pets, we all know what that feeling is like. And both to have them as well as to lose them. So, who's ever lost a pet and then just was made to feel like who gives a crap, basically, regardless of age. I have found that with grief, especially, and it's not even limited to whether it's human or pet. People just don't know what to say. And then they end up being really awkward. And then they generally say something really kind of offensive or stupid because, again, they don't know what to say. So when I work with clients that have, that are going through loss, they have said that to me a lot, that, people just don't understand. And I usually tell them that's fine because they don't have to understand. It's nice if people empathize, but they don't have to understand. So when we talk about bonds, there's different types of bonds that you will find that people have. And so the way that I categorize these, you have no bond, and those are going to be people that are, generally speaking, now this is, there's always going to be exceptions to everything, but generally speaking, people that don't have a bond with animals, those are going to be the ones that really do, say, well, it was just a dog. They don't interact with that animal very much. They're, they live outside by themselves, with little human interaction or any kind of interaction of any sort with anyone. They just kind of have them there to bark, to have a presence, maybe a deterrent for thieves or, would-be thieves, whatever. Just to be part of the scenery, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, at the house. And so if those pets die, then they are much less likely to really have any kind of emotions about it or any period of time, really. And that can be for several different reasons. I mean, they may have come from a house where that is just how they were raised. Pets really didn't have any value. And so then you're going to have a traditional bond. That's going to be these are the overall good owners. The basic needs are met. They get their vet visits done. They're glad to have them, but it's just kind of those basic needs being met. They make sure they have food and water and shelter, and they get them but they're not really so much a part of everything that they do. And so then you have owners who have a deep bond with their pets. And these are going to be the owners who, those pets are a family member. They they go everywhere that they can, the owners go. They'll take them to the beach, or they'll take them to, like Bark in the Park. Like Dothan every year on the last day of the summer, I guess is what it is, for the water park here in Dothan. When they get ready to drain everything and close it down for the winter, it's open to dogs. And so everybody brings their dogs out and they all get to play in in all the wade pools and all the things that they have at the water park. And so, when you have a deep bond with your pet, that's what a lot of those owners will do. They really become a part of their family, a valued member. They'll get pictures done at holidays or greeting cards, that kind of thing. And so when they experience the loss of that pet, then it's definitely felt more deeply and for longer than someone with, say, of course, no bond or just a more traditional type of bond. And I think that's really the majority, at least the people that I have come in contact with, is going to have that deep bond. The idea of having a pet is quite different than having a pet. And that's true. People they really don't research. I think enough for sure. We have especially found that to be the case in rescue with the breed that we work with. And so then you have what I call an exceptional bond. And this is where you can move easily, if you're not careful, move easily into that kind of almost dysfunctional relationship. The pet becomes a part of their identity. They, could see them as a soulmate. They feel like they have this connection to this pet that cannot ever be replaced by anything, even another person. That's not to say that, with a deep bond, that you can't feel that you have a more of a bond with an animal, with your pet, than you do with some people. We know that can happen, but it's not to the point of it being, dysfunctional. And so when those people, those owners lose their pet, it can be very, very devastating. It can be very intense for them to get through, because they truly feel like a part of their identity is gone. And so that's, and of course, animal hoarding is it's a whole separate thing. But I think a lot of times that can also lead to some animal hoarding. These are their children. And I don't just mean, this is my fur baby, that, a lot of people use that term, but like they actually view these animals as to that level. And so then when that loss happens, it is very, very much felt and can be hard to get through. Okay, so, and if y'all have any questions during this, I do have the chat pulled up, and so you can pop those in, or feel free to, pop in on the audio. But right now, do you have any questions as far as the types of bonds? Okay. And these are I came up with those terms, and I'm sure you could describe them in different ways. This was just how these are the terms that I put to them that I felt like described it the best. All right. And so, of course, when we're talking about pet loss and grief, that's going to be because a pet has died. Hey, Meredith. Children and bonds? Yes, absolutely. I'll do that before I move on to this next part. Thank you. So, children and animals can bond very, very closely. They can have a very tight bond. I feel one of the big things around that is because, for children and adults both, but pets are non-judgmental. Like, they are flat out just the most non-judgmental being that you're going to come into contact with. They honestly don't care where you live. They don't care who you know. They don't care what your job is, what you wear, what you're driving. They don't care about any of that. And they are the only thing that is capable of loving someone else more than they love themselves. And so they will love their owners to a fault. And we see that time and time again, on the rescue side of things, that you will have these dogs that are, can be physically abused day in and day out, and they're going to be right there by this person that's doing this. And so I think with children, it makes it very easy for them to not feel judged when they have these pets. It also, gives them something to help be responsible for when you have a pet in the home. That's not to say that, you go out and get a dog for your 8-year-old because that's what they want to do that week, knowing that they may not have any interest in 2 weeks. Of course, if you're going to have a pet, you need to do it with the understanding that you're going to be the one responsible at the end of the day because you're the adult. But yes, children can have very good bonds. Dogs, cats, whatever, pets can be, safe places for kids. That's someone that they can tell their secrets to, talk things through with, that are not going, like I said, they're not going to judge them. They're just going to be there. They can help kids feel more, build self-esteem. Also, there's programs where kids can go, and at different shelters, kids can go and read to dogs at the shelter. That gets interaction with dogs and the kids, so they're getting that human interaction. But also, if a kid is not a strong reader, dog's not going to laugh at you. They don't care if you stumble on your words, that sort of thing. So being able to do these things and really just be themselves is very helpful. And that can be done in the presence. Excuse me. Y'all, my allergies, it's crazy. I'm sorry. But being able to just really be who they are in the presence of an animal can be very, very helpful. And they can help kids to regulate emotions as well, just because they're going to be gentle around them. And so having, a bond with a pet as a child can definitely happen. One of the things that I tell people too with pet loss is, like, don't lie to your kids. Don't say, oh, well, I'm sorry, Fido ran away, because you don't want to tell them she had to euthanize her dog, because then you just leave them with this whole, why am I not good enough for my dog to stay around? So that just starts a whole other thing. So yes, kids and children and bonds with pets is quite significant, and can really be one of the most stable things in their life, just depending on what's going on in their house at that time. I'm just going to make a note about that too. All right. So that leads us to, of course, reasons for death and euthanasia. Of course, illness, and that's whether it is short-term or long-term illness. So you have acute illnesses that just come on quickly. That can be aggressive cancers. It could be, heart conditions that progress quickly, that sort of thing. And so you get a limited amount of time. And then you have long-term illnesses, and both of those, honestly, I don't know that one is necessarily any better than the other, because they're both going to have their own type of grief. With a short-term illness, you're going to have the, why didn't I see anything? Why didn't I know? We didn't get enough time, that sort of stuff. And then with long-term illness, you're watching your pet die. And again, it's not necessarily much different than watching a loved one with a long-term illness. Then there's also, you know, sudden death. So that could be, you know, they get hit by a car, they're out playing in the yard and they have a heart attack and they just die right there. Those are both traumatic for sure. They're unexpected. You know that it's not anything that you know, especially when you have things like heart attacks, whatever, there's things that you can't control, but that doesn't make it any easier, doesn't make you feel any better about it. And then there's old age. You know, they could pass away in their sleep. And this could be in conjunction with long-term illness, or they may start to decline quickly. That's gonna, again, it's gonna come with its own type of grief, because you know, if you've had this dog since they were a puppy at, you know, 10 or 12 weeks old, and here they are now 12 years old, the last decade of your life has been spent with this particular animal, and that's going to have a significant impact. And the thing that can make euthanasia so very hard is, you know, people will struggle with, have I waited long enough? Like, are they really ready? How do I know they're ready? Should I try other things? So there's going to be all these would have, should have, could have. And especially when you're talking like large dogs, because we, you know, with us working with Dobermans, they're medium to large size dogs, but you don't generally have a dog that's under 60, 65 pounds. And they can go up, you know, just depending on the dog, and weight to, you know, 90, 95 pounds. And so if you have a dog whose body is failing, you know, their hips are going out and they have hip dysplasia and they really struggle to get up and they struggle to get around easily, you know, you have to consider how long can you realistically maintain essentially carrying a 90-pound dog around, you know, to get them out the door and to get them back to the bed and, you know, that sort of thing. Not only for you, but their quality of life. And so when their body gives out before their brain does, essentially, it makes it even harder because they can be very alert, but just not be physically well. Excuse me. And so then, you know, the other reason that euthanasia can take place is for behavioral issues. Nobody wants to talk about this. It's very taboo, especially in the rescue community. Y'all, it is cutthroat. I don't know how many of you, if any, have any experience really in the rescue world, but it can be severe. And there are two camps. You either have people that believe that behavioral euthanasia can be necessary, and you have people who believe absolutely 100% without a doubt that there's never a reason. You're not going to change either side. All you can do is know what you believe in and go from there. But yes, behavioral euthanasia, it can be a thing. If a dog is not emotionally well, then they are still not healthy as a whole. Just like with humans, a lot of times we don't take emotional well-being into account with animals. And that's not just dogs. I mean, that's from the way that, you know, animals can be kept in, you know, in zoos and, you know, all the different ways that they're kept in captivity. They still need to be emotionally cared for, mentally well, so that they're healthy in all the ways. They're healthy as a whole. And, you know, as social workers, we're all about whole body. You know, it's not just one part or another. It's everything is supposed to be healthy. And, you know, a lot of times with behavioral euthanasia, again, it's the owner can know that it is the right thing. And you're either going to have people that say, why did you wait so long to put this dog down? Or why didn't you do more? Because again, they're not going to understand what it's like if they haven't been in the position that you're in. And so when working with clients, if you happen to have one that this was something that they had to do, they had to put a dog down due to behavioral issues, just be there, like validate what they're saying, because it is going to be a struggle. And it's not ever easy, because you essentially are making literally a life and death decision for another living being. And that's heavy to carry around with you. So then we talk about the types of grief, and these are all, of course, brief overviews, because I knew that we were on a limited amount of time. But once I get through these, these types of grief, I want you guys to be able to ask questions as you have them. So with, like any other type of loss, there's going to be types of grief that go along with the loss of a pet. To me, what I have noticed, the primary type of grief that is associated with pet loss is disenfranchised grief. Are y'all familiar with that? Anybody know what that is? We've all heard it at some point. It's just not a term that necessarily gets used a lot. So disenfranchised grief is just where it is under-acknowledged or not acknowledged at all. So that's going to be, people that are like, I just don't know why you're so upset. I mean, it was a dog, or you can get another one, or, it's just not validated in any sort of way. And again, they don't have to understand. And you as a therapist, even if you're not an animal person per se, you don't have to be empathetic to their situation. That is our job is to be empathetic in these situations. And so even if you can't understand it to the level that they can, know that it's important to them, which, makes it important to you. As their therapist, you may be the only person they really have that they feel like they can talk to about this. So then another type of grief that goes along with this is actually secondary loss. And so secondary loss, with, again, as with humans, can be, things like loss of routine. So my husband and I, we lost 2 of our dogs in a 10-day time frame back in 2022. And one of our dogs had been very sick for quite a while. He is actually the first dog I used for a therapy dog. He'd had congestive heart failure for over a year. I mean, we knew it was coming. So you have anticipatory grief there. But again, you do all the things that you need to do. So he had like his heart medications and all that kind of stuff. You're caring for a being that is ill. And so when that ends, whether it's abruptly or after an extended illness, then all of the things that went into caring for that pet are now gone. So you have, like, for instance, we have 6 dogs currently. At that time, we had 5. So we went from 5 food bowls to 3 food bowls in a week and a half. And along with that, we went from having one on medication a couple of times a day, to, and like syringe medication in his food, all of that kind of stuff, to not having anybody on any medications in a very short period of time. And so what you find is that you're not really sure what you're supposed to be doing, because it can take up a lot of extra time putting in that extra care. And so you just lose routine. You can lose kind of a sense of purpose, even, because you're, to an extent, you're a caregiver to this pet. They're relying on you. And so then you're like, well, what do I do now? Because you can't necessarily, depending on the length of illness, you can't really remember a time when either you didn't have that pet around or where you weren't doing something extra to care for them. And so that can be a real, that's definitely a big loss that people can feel. And Laura said she had not thought about the secondary grief, and it's not necessarily, it's not something that people think about a lot. And it's not anybody's fault. I mean, again, it's just like, we don't know what we don't know. Which is why I like to, educate people on this. But when you've had as much animal loss through the years as I have, you really do notice these sorts of things. I was completely lost after our two boys passed so quickly within each other in 2022. And I was like, I have zero routine of any kind that I'm used to, that I'm used to now. And so it gets difficult to kind of find where you're supposed to go from there. And they're not the first two dogs that have died, but every pet that passes away, people are going to have a different connection to, or a different attachment to, whatever the case may be. And so that grief that they experience can be very different for each pet, for sure. So then you've got, there are other types of grief, of course, that's included. Those are going to be things such as, traumatic grief, prolonged grief, which is just taking longer than, I guess, normal. We know that there's not really a timeline on grief, but what maybe that person feels like is, normal. Absent grief, where you just kind of you're just kind of in shock initially. You're not able to grieve. Delayed grief, once you come out of that shock, then you're like, oh, holy crap. And then all of those things start as you start to process things, and those are just a few, but I feel like the disenfranchised grief and that secondary grief can definitely be, or secondary loss, can definitely be the two most important, when it comes to the death of a pet. There have been multiple studies, and you can ask, person after person, an expert, whatever, but we know that the loss that someone can feel when they lose a pet can absolutely be equal to, or higher than the loss that they experience with some humans. Because for some people, their pets are what they interact with. Like, Troy had mentioned earlier, working in home health, when you have the elderly and the senior citizens, we know that having a pet is good for depression, because it gives you that reason to get up. It gives you something to be responsible for. It gives you something to take care of, gives you a reason to go outside when you take them for a walk, all those kinds of things. Plus, them sleeping in the bed with you can lower blood pressure, all of those things. But for someone who really does not have other people in their life that they are close to, this pet is it. This is their connection to the outside world. This is their purpose for them to get up out of bed every day. This is their reason to keep going. I did work in substance abuse for a couple of years. And so I worked in a residential 30-day program for men. And the two things that I heard the most that men missed coming into this program were their mother and their dog. Not necessarily in that order, but one of those two, right? And so those were the two primary things that they missed. It wasn't their girlfriend. Of course, they'd miss their kids, but it was their mama and their dog were like the top, very top of that list for the things that they missed. And there have been there's a lot of stories too of recovering addicts that is the reason that they have stayed sober. Their pet, you'll hear people say, my pet saved my life. And in a lot of different ways, they can. If you know that you have, your dog is at home waiting on you, you're less likely to put more thought into if you're going to drink and drive, because if you don't ever show back up, they're not going to know why. Is anybody going to know that you have a pet at home? So, things like that. It's whatever the reason that you need, right, to make those choices that are good for you. And so they can definitely be very important in the elderly, the senior citizen population. They're definitely a sense of comfort for people who, live alone or are married. My husband did contract work for 3 years in Afghanistan. And so it was me and our dogs until he came home. He would be home for 30 days at a time, and then he'd leave again for, 90 to 120 days. And so they were my company. They were the thing that kept me in a routine. They kept me on track. I knew that, well, I need to be home by this time because, they're dependent on me to feed them, those sorts of things. And so that's where some of those bonds can come from, and why that loss can be so significant. So some of the ways that you can help clients that you're working with, the most important thing, like I was saying earlier, is just validate their feelings. Again, you don't have to be an animal person to be empathetic, right? You don't have to understand why that loss is so hard for them or why it has impacted them more than others. It's our job to support them. You may truly be the only person that does not judge them for the feelings that they have about their pet. I'll have people that don't feel like they can express it to their spouses because they're afraid of, how the spouse is going to react. Are they going to think that it's stupid? Or my kid's going to think that it's stupid? What are my coworkers going to think? My friends, they don't have dogs, like they don't understand. And so you may be it. And so, just kind of keep that in mind. Other ways that you can help is to just reassure them that they did the best that they can do. There is always going to be a level of guilt associated with if you have to make the choice to euthanize your dog, whether that's for sickness or, like I said, behavioral, that sort of thing. More often than not, honestly, it's illness, it's some sort of illness. It is the absolute last gift that we can give our pet is setting them free. It is also the most selfless thing really that we can do for another being. It is very, very easy for a pet owner to say, well, we're just going to wait a little bit longer. We're just going to wait a little bit longer. We're just going to, and not to make light of it, but I mean, you could have a dog that legit can't get up and go outside to the bathroom and can't see out of either eye. You got to kind of touch it to see if it's breathing. And the owner's like, oh, well, we're just going to give him a little bit longer. Let that baby go be with Jesus. Like, we have to make those decisions at some point for what is best for that animal. And that's very, very difficult for people to do. And they will always second guess, is there something else I could have done? A lot of people believe in chemo for dogs when they have cancer. I don't. Other people do. They're not going to change my mind, and I'm not going to change theirs. That's fine. I just am of the opinion that, I don't want the time that my pets have left to be spent that sick. I know how sick chemo can make people. I've been through chemo. I've known plenty of people that have been through chemo. And so, and they're not able to tell us about their level of discomfort like we are. And so I don't want the time that is left to be that hard on them. And the fact is that it just does not help dogs the way that it does people, unfortunately. And the facts are there for that. And so, if they're struggling with, I don't know if we should do it or we shouldn't do it, I just encourage people to look at that quality of life. That needs to be a number one, really a top number one factor when they're trying to make a decision on if they should euthanize this animal or not, or if they should do chemo or not. But you can encourage them to do a bucket list. We have a forever foster that's here right now in our home that we're doing bucket list stuff for because he has cancer. He's old and he's full of heartworms. He came to us full of heartworms. And because he was already older, he couldn't safely be treated. So he's not even neutered. So therefore, with all these things going on, we couldn't adopt him. So he's just living with us, and that's fine. And his body is just not, it was not at a place where all these other things could be treated. And so now he has cancer, but at this point, he's fine. He gets up excited for food. He goes out and does his business. He hangs out in the living room with us. He goes to sleep quickly because he's old, and that's what he does, and that's fine. He's happy just existing. And so until we know that none of those things bring him pleasure or joy anymore, then we'll continue. And once we know that those things are not bringing him joy anymore, then we'll know it's time. So those are, important things to take into account when you're working with these clients. If they've come to you and they've already lost their pet, then you can encourage them to, like you would do with clients that are, going through other types of grief. Let them bring photos and, share memories and happy times and things like that with, let them celebrate their pet with you. Again, that may be the only place that they can. One of the things that I don't recommend doing like right away is say, well, just why don't you go get another dog? We know that it can be helpful, and there will probably come a point where you could say that. It's just not, don't do it that first visit, because then they're still going to feel, chances are they're going to feel invalidated because your recommendation is that they just replace it, which we know is not the suggestion, but that's probably how it's going to feel at some point. You'll know as you work with clients in this type of grief, when it is probably a good time for them to consider. Chances are they're going to bring it up before you do, and that's going to come with a whole other set of guilt. I feel like it's too soon, or I don't want it to seem like I didn't care about my pet, and none of those things are true either. People need what they need at different times, and that's not going to be a one size fits all sort of thing for sure. So the biggest thing really is, let them be heard. And they just need to know that they did the best that they could do, at that time. All right. We have coyotes in city neighborhoods that have climbed privacy fences and attacked small pets. Owners' grief is riddled with guilt. Absolutely. Because our purpose is to protect them and to keep them safe, and we're going to feel like we failed them if something like that happens. In those cases, because I've had clients that said, I turned my head for 2 minutes and my dog ran out in the highway and got hit by a truck. And, maybe this dog has been out without a fence or a leash every day for the last 7 years of its life, and nothing ever happened. And this is the day, because anything can ever happen any day. And so one of the things that I try to help them to see is that not everything is in our control. And they did not maliciously put this dog in harm's way. Guilt implies some sort of intent, right? Or that something was done maliciously. Did you go outside and throw your pet to the coyotes? No. Did you go outside and throw your dog out into the highway in front of a truck? No. And so there are going to be those things that we don't have control of, and despite our best efforts, could still happen. And again, working with your clients, you're going to know kind of what they're receptive to and what they're not receptive to, because, people will say things that don't make sense. One of the biggest, or not that don't make sense, but that can be, frustrating to the person going through it. One of the biggest things I hear from people with grief, whether again, it's humans or pets, is somebody will be like, well, they just, so-and-so said, it's like, well, they're just in a better place now. Nobody wants to hear that. Like, I'm just going to be honest, because that's just the kind of person, nobody wants to hear that. When we're in that moment of grief, that is just not what we want to hear. And so I try not to say that to, the people that I'm working with either, because we don't want to, again, make their feelings any less valid. Okay, so I'll stop talking. Does anybody have questions? Because that was all that I'd made for my notes today, because I know that it's a short session today. And I did see where Heather had said dogs and moms are the two sources of unconditional love for most people. And that's it. Dogs are absolutely, pets are absolutely, they will love you unconditionally, and absolutely to a fault, for sure. All right. Did anybody else have any questions or comments? I felt like I just rattled off a whole bunch of stuff. So I hope that it made some sense. Hey, Amanda, it's helpful. Good. What, because I don't know what area and what fields, you all are in. Oh, good, Laura. I'm glad that you feel like you'll be better prepared. Good.
Nikki, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you answered it, so that's why I had jumped right on. But I noticed that when you were talking a little bit earlier, it sounds very similar to when we talk about end of life for humans.
Yes.
But are there any helpful tools to help pet parents when they're thinking about, should they go through with the euthanasia or not? Are there any kind of tools or anything, questions that they should ponder, just as we do with the end of life with humans?
Yeah. So, for sure, the like I was mentioning, the quality of life is the big thing. But other than that, you can look at things related to treatment. So, is a treatment option, for instance, whether or not to have, a tumor in a specific location removed, right? You want to look at the age of the pet, of course, because the older they get, the more that anesthesia can affect them negatively, and would, could potentially, be quite harmful. And so you want to look at that, their age, their health overall outside of this issue. And then also how much more time is this procedure, going to give them. So if they have a tumor removed, are they looking at, they may get 6 months or, is it likely that they'll live another 5 or 10 years perfectly healthy? And so those are, a couple of things to look at regarding trying to decide for treatment options or for euthanasia. I tell people often that if we pay attention, like they will tell us, our pets will absolutely tell us when they are tired if we pay attention. We have to, just kind of be still sometimes and let them guide the way for us on different things, because you will notice changes. Their eyes will change. I have not ever had a pet that has gotten older or gotten ill that we've had to put to sleep that like their eyes didn't change. You just see a change in them. They look tired. They definitely aren't as active as they used to be, and things like, are they having trouble breathing? If they can't breathe every day, and they're in respiratory distress constantly, like that's not healthy. And it's not good for them. And really, it is not good for us to watch day in and day out either, for our own wellness and our own mental health. If your dog has all but stopped eating, do you spend every day, trying all the different things? And people are, again, they're going to do what they feel like they need to feel like they've checked all those boxes, and to feel like they've done all the things. But, do you really, and these are some of those questions, do you really want to watch your dog essentially starve itself to death if it cannot eat because it feels nauseous, which is usually why dogs don't eat when they're, at the end of life, is everything makes them feel sick. Is essentially our need to keep them here with us on a selfish level, does that outweigh, their quality of life? Does that outweigh their right to have dignity when they go? Just like we all want. And so and especially for these pets that have, they've given you 10, 15 years of their life, then, do we want to put them to that point where there's just, give them some dignity before they leave? So it is that last good thing that we can do for them. So just look at those kinds of things as far as that. Grief can also be affected by the multiple roles a dog may have had. Okay. I had been unprepared for how others would grieve when I lost my therapy dog. Absolutely. Because I do use a therapy dog. And I have thought about that. He is 9 now. And if I will often joke that, like, my clients come to see me because Riker is there. And when I go on days without him, if I have errands to run or whatever the case may be, they'll show up and they're like, "Where's Riker?" And I was like, "Well, he didn't come today." And I mean, and they'll joke with me and they're like, "Well, I just can't keep coming here if Riker's not going to be here." I mean, that's part of the, and of course they don't mean it, but yes, it will definitely, it'll impact not just your clients, but, like coworkers, like my coworkers are going to be for sure, affected by it. It's definitely something that people get used to seeing. Let's see. There was one up here too that I'd missed. Grief in general is something we don't talk about enough, especially grief that others don't understand. Okay. Facilitating a pet loss retreat. Do you have any advice? I think that, of course, be prepared for how unprepared people may be, that, that they could be affected kind of all over again. Troy and I were talking about that to an extent before we started, how, trauma can reopen, depending on what we're doing. If, you've had trauma within, losing a pet and things like that. For you, be prepared also that that is a possibility that you could get some of that that happens. What would you recommend to a no bond clinician regarding assessment type things who may be blind to components of this type of loss? Now, do you mean assessment as far like Heather was saying, like towards bereavement, specifically bereavement, or more around the losing of the pet?
That's not the primary reason that the client is coming to you. But like I said, I just had a intake this past week of a client who lost the pet that she had over 15 plus years.
Okay.
She kind of stated over it because that's not her primary concern.
Okay.
But from the intake, I can really tell that that pet was a huge source of companionship for her.
Okay. And so, but for you, I'm assuming that it's, pets aren't as central maybe for you as they are.
Right.
Okay. And that's fair. And again, like I said, we're all different in that respect. I still would, bring it up, especially, you have to give yourself credit, because even though you may consider yourself a no bond type of person, when it comes to pets, you still spotted that in her intake. And so just because you don't view it the same way, necessarily doesn't mean that you aren't able to empathize with it. If you feel like it's something that's important, then bring that up with her and allow her that space. She may not feel like she can say anything, because again, a lot of times it's disenfranchised grief. And so we don't, people already go to therapy and are like, I swear I'm not crazy, and so she may not feel like, that this is any different than anything else. But the fact that you can still pick out that was a impactful relationship, then, still handle that in the same kind of way. You'll still have that ability to, give her this opportunity to share this grief and, do some of these CBT things, like making a memorial, sharing memories, all of those, those things that we would do with people in other forms. Because it can definitely be, like Heather was saying, it's very similar to losing a friend or a human family member.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for asking. Anybody else? I didn't realize how grief can also affect another pet in the home. After a pet passes away, it took about 2 years for her to return to acting like she did before our older dog passed away. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it can definitely impact the other pets in your home. So real quick, back to what I was referring to with, we lost 2 of our dogs within 10 days of each other. So our one dog had been in heart failure for quite some time. Our other dog got ill quickly, declined quickly, and passed away quickly. So they discovered a tumor in his abdomen, had that removed. He had difficulty kind of recovering from it. We didn't know any of this, of course, because even now to this day, we're like, if we had just left it in there, but if we had left it, we still might not have had as much time as we did. It's always a back and forth thing. So, but him and our other dog, it's Phoenix and Tino. So Tino was the one that had the tumor in his abdomen. Finally got that healed up. He was getting better. He had to go back in the hospital because the incision, he started getting necrosis of the skin. Like it was a whole thing. Got him back out of the vet. That was finally starting to get healed. And then he had this big spot that came up on his shoulder out of nowhere. And we've been with dogs long enough to know it was probably not going to be a good thing, and it wasn't. So then he had bone cancer, and they diagnosed that on a Friday. And this was just within, again, a few weeks of the other stuff kind of getting on track and healing. So they diagnosed that on a Friday, and on Sunday we had to have our vet come over and put him to sleep, because bone cancer is quick and dirty, like nobody's business. And he was in that much pain in that short amount of time. So typically when we've had to put our pets to sleep in the past, it's been done at the vet's office. Ours was kind enough to come over because there was no getting him there without him being in a whole lot of pain. So we let our dogs, since he was here, we did let our dogs come in after. And that was on a Sunday. That next day on Monday, Phoenix, which is our dog that was in heart failure, quickly started to decline and was gone in the next 8 or 9 days. So we really feel like that was kind of that last thing that maybe he was kind of holding out a little bit longer, because Tino was so ill, because they spent a ton of time together. Like they slept on their bed together. They stayed hung out in a room. Like they were always together. And so, once he realized that Tino was gone, maybe he just felt like he could finally rest. He didn't have to hold out anymore. But dogs can definitely be affected. They can go into a depression. So, encouraging your clients that are multi-pet owners to, give them that extra, of course, some extra love and attention, but still create as much normalcy as you've had, because otherwise you're both going to end up in a depression. And that's not healthy for anybody. But yes, it can definitely have a big impact on other pets.
All right. Well, I think this has been a very awesome presentation. Nikki, you was able to cover so much within a short period of time, and I love the amount of questions that we had coming in, which showed that people were very engaged and very interested in the topic. And we appreciate you all for engaging in this event. And we want to give Lily a virtual round of applause and
Thank you.
for presenting to us this evening. And again, I want to thank all of you all for coming out, and being at this event with us. I think the month of July we may be taking off. I have to check back with Dr. Lewis on that and see what we have planned. That we will get that information out to you. If you're not already a part of Social Workers Alabama, it's a good place to get linked up to our events, or you can find us at Eventbrite and also get noticed when we have events coming out as well. But for now, we are going to go on and end this session for this evening. We will be getting back with you with these continuing education. And I'm hoping that we can get those out sooner than later, but give us latest till Friday. And thanks again for coming out. We'll see you all soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.